Tom, welcome to Google.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it is our pleasure. So as I mentioned before we got going, we're very big fans here of Quest Nutrition.
Yes, it's exciting.
S'mores is the flavor of the day, and I can't wait for Thursday, which is cookies and cream.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, those are two heavy hitters, man. Respect on the choices.
Yes. Well, thank you, facilities. So Tom, you have a wonderful story, very fascinating resume, if I do say so. And so let's start from there. You majored in film at USC.
Yes.
Then you went into technology.
Right, obviously.
Obviously. And then you went into nutrition. Can you kind of walk us through sort of that road that you took?
Yeah, there were a lot of changes that happened in my life that made those things happen. So in film school, USC Film School is statistically speaking harder to get into than Harvard Law. And I had managed to get into USC Film. I was thinking, hey, I'm the business over here. Like, I'm just going to crush it. And the first year I did, and I did very, very well. And that set me up in my final year at USC to be able to do a thesis film. And only 4 people in the entire class get to do a thesis film. And I was chosen as one of them. So I went from no one thinking I'm going to be able to get into film school. The career counselors at USC literally told me to stop taking film classes because they're like, you're not going to get in. We see this happen all the time. People think they're going to get in, they don't. And so I said, look, I'm going to take somebody out from the admissions committee and just pin them down and say, what do I need to do to get in? So I did that. I took one of the guys out and I said, my SATs, I got a 990 on my SATs, and I took it twice. And I'm saying that here in Google, so I know you guys got some real SAT scores, which I did not. And so the counselors are looking at my SAT scores and saying, this isn't going to happen. I'm sitting down with one of the guys in the admissions committee, said, look, those are my SAT scores. What do I need to do to get in? And he said, look, we accept people at 2 phases. One is an incoming freshman, and then your SAT scores matter a lot. And then as an incoming junior, and your SAT scores don't matter at all because they're meant to just tell me how well you're going to do in school. But by then, you'll have had 2 years here at USC. I'll just look at your grades. So I'm a freshman at this time. So he said, look, if you get grades that are good enough, I'm not even going to look at your SAT scores. So I took that as like, that's my mission. So I went and locked myself in a dorm room for 2 years. I didn't date, I didn't party, I didn't drink, do drugs, nothing. I worked and I studied, and that was it. And so I ended up getting into film school. So get into film school, then I do well in film school, get the senior thesis film, and I think this is it, I'm on lock. I'm going to crush this senior thesis film. I'm going to get out. I'm going to have the 3-picture deal. I'm going to go take over Hollywood. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to be, rich and famous by the time I'm 26, and that's that, like, right? Like, it's all coming true. And then I failed so miserably on my senior thesis film, so publicly and so embarrassingly, that it absolutely destroyed my sense of self. And so as I'm crashing and burning, and because it's pretty dog eat dog in the film industry in Los Angeles, in that little microcosm of film school. And so people are laughing, excuse me, laughing about how poorly the film went and all that stuff. And
so that's how you failed in regards to like the reception the film received?
Yeah, it really was bad. There's just no 2 ways about that. Like, even if people have been like, oh, Tom, you tried so hard. Like, it just was a bad film. It was so bad, in fact, that I stole the master film so that it can never be watched again. I want to be really clear about how truly bad this film was. And so in that moment, I realized, and it's funny how often people push back, what I realized was I did not have talent as a filmmaker. And that's such a deeply uncomfortable thing for people to say or to hear. And it was for me at the time, for sure. And it's not for me now at all, because now I don't worry about innate talent. I only worry about a growth mindset, being able to get good at something. And so, excuse me, I'm dealing with a cough here. If I had understood at that time that I could get better, it wouldn't have created the panic, but I didn't think I could get better. So that was the first movement. Then once I leave film school, I'm totally lost. I realize I'm a talentless hack. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life anymore. I decide that the only path for me is going to be to become the king of remedial jobs. And I wanted to feel good about myself. And so I was going into positions where I'd be interviewing where I knew I'd be smarter than the person interviewing me, and the likelihood of the job, me getting the job, was virtually 100%. And so that was where I was, and I was selling video games retail, and I mean, this is after getting a degree and having tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. I'm working in these really dead-end jobs, just trying to make ends meet and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life.
So you purposely aimed lower?
I literally purposely aimed lower. And it was an ego boost, and it was great. And then luckily, somebody offered me a job teaching at a film school. And I thought, okay, well, those that can do and those that can't teach. So this is this is perfect. And I start teaching, and I realize, whoa, like I'm embarrassing myself in front of the class. I, oddly enough, actually don't know enough to be teaching this. So I'm going to have to go home at night and learn enough in the lesson to be able to come in the next day and teach. But then as I start doing that, I actually start improving. And so I start thinking, well, if I can make my own films better, or can I help them make their films better? And if I can I make my own better?
Mm-hmm. So at this point, you're what, like two years removed from school? What time frame are we looking from USC?
Yeah, so exactly that, about 2 years out.
Mm-hmm. And so you're teaching, you're kind of touching up on your own career, I suppose, as a filmmaker. And then how did that lead into, nutrition?
So now we have to cross the chasm between considering myself the king of remedial jobs, then realizing that I can help these people make their films better, and by the transitive property, I should be able to make my films better. So that is the beginning of me really thinking about a growth mindset, which up until that point, I had never had a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. And Carol Dweck had not yet written her seminal book, Growth Mindset, on the topic. So,
can you explain a little bit about the differences between like that growth mindset and the fixed mindset?
Yeah, definitely. So a fixed mindset, somebody that has a fixed mindset believes that their talent and intelligence are fixed traits. That whatever you're born with, that's it. That's as good as you're ever going to be. And so, hey, make the most of it. Somebody that has a growth mindset realizes that that's just your starting off point. And while we may not all be equal from where our starting off point is, the human animal is literally designed from the ground up to be able to adapt. And so it begins to be a question of how much are you willing to adapt? What price are you willing to pay to get great at something? And so teaching, I'm determined to survive this interview here. Teaching was the first thing that really began to give me that sense that, okay, wait a second, I could put time into this, I could learn, I could grow, I could get better. And while I'm teaching, these two guys come in and they see me teaching, and they were very successful entrepreneurs. And ironically, they were bodybuilders. Now, as a kid growing up, I had promised myself two things. So growing up in Tacoma, a slightly chubby kid in a morbidly obese family that teetered between blue collar and white collar, I'd promised myself one day I'll be rich and one day I'll have six-pack abs. And so these two guys walk in, they're rich and they have six-pack abs. And they were like, hey, you're pretty bright. We're about to start this company. We need a copywriter. Why don't you come be a copywriter for us? But don't think of yourself as a copywriter. Understand that you can have any role that you want in this company. You just have to become the right person for the job. And so I was just young enough and just hungry enough to, really transform my life and make something of it, that I leapt at the chance. I left my teaching position. I went out, started working with them, and through that process of building that company, and this is a very long story that I think is powerful and interesting, but I'll spare you so that we can cover some other topics. But it ends with me having an emotional crisis, and two, really. The first emotional crisis is I'm arguing for things that I know are worse for the company, which means that they're less likely to make me rich, but because they were my idea. So I'm fighting tooth and nail for an idea that I know is wrong, that I know will move the company backwards, that I have a voice in my head screaming, this isn't going to work. But I so want to be right, I so needed to be right, that I keep pushing and I keep arguing. And then finally one day, because my partners were much smarter than I am, and I'll define intellect as the ability to process raw data rapidly. So they could just process raw data very fast. They could think through the situation faster than I could. Because of that, I was always feeling badly about myself because I just couldn't outthink them. And because at that point, I had a fixed mindset and I valued myself in being right, good, smart, worthy, right? All permanent states of being, because someone with a fixed mindset believes everything is a permanent state of being. So I needed to win this argument. And ironically, I end up winning the argument to my detriment and realize, okay, now what? And I have this moment of crisis where I'm like, I always tell people what I really want in life is to be rich. But I'm acting as if what I really want is to just feel good about myself on a neurochemical level.
So in a way, you fighting for this idea that you knew was wrong was kind of your way of asserting control over the situation?
It was my way of being right. And because I valued that and my self-esteem was built around being smart and being right, if I was around people who were smarter than me and I was always wrong, then I had no self-esteem. And so I literally then end up asking myself that very question, which is, just be honest about what you want. Like, if what you want is to feel good about yourself, then you need to leave this environment. Because you don't feel good around these people. They're smarter than you. They've got more good ideas than you. So leave. But if, on the other hand, what you really want is your goal, you actually want to get rich, which was my obsession at the time, then you've got to figure out another way to think about your self-esteem. And that's what I did. So in that moment, I realized I needed to switch what I built my self-esteem around to something that is anti-fragile. Now, at the time, I didn't have the words anti-fragile. If you guys have read Nassim Taleb's book by that name, then you know what he means. Something that is resilient or strong or tough, they're still all defined by their breaking point. But something that's anti-fragile actually gets stronger the more you attack it. And so I was trying to think of what is something that's going to make me feel better about myself the more I realize I'm wrong, the more I realize that I'm stupid, not the smartest person, had the worst idea, that I'm not yet good enough, all those things. Like, how do I make that not a liability, but my very strength, the very thing that's driving me? And that became flipping what I built my self-esteem around to building it around identifying the right answer faster than anyone else, always being willing to admit when I was wrong, and actually taking pride in that. So that in a business meeting, if 30 seconds before I'd been arguing tooth and nail about an idea, it's mine, I believe in it, I'm going after it, and then somebody says something, and I realize they're right, then on a dime, I would stop and say, you've got the right answer. And then I would become the energy behind that idea. And that was the first real crisis.
Of readjusting sort of your expectation and around your self-esteem and your values.
100%. And as soon as I made that switch, I started moving up in the company very, very quickly. So now flash forward a few years, I become an owner in the company through sweat equity. The company is worth, at the height, I think it was valued at like $22 million. So on paper, I'm a multimillionaire. My salary's higher than it's ever been in my life. And now I'm completely miserable. And I'm like, I'm living the cliche of money can't buy happiness. And I'm like, this is a joke. Like, this was so predictable and so easy to see coming. How have I actually gotten caught in this trap? And I began to realize that I wasn't pursuing things that gave me more energy. I was pursuing something that was taking more energy than it was giving. I wasn't pursuing something that I was passionate about. And what I didn't yet understand about money is that money is, in and of itself, it's inert, right? Nobody, save for maybe Scrooge McDuck and possibly Warren Buffett, like, would actually get off on swimming in their own money, right? So it's not the money, right? When you talk to Warren Buffett, part of what drives him is it's a scorecard, right? He gets off on the scorecard. But if you don't, if that's not your thing and it's not mine, so I'm building this business, I'm learning all these skills, I'm coming in, I'm working my ass off, I'm working 7 days a week, I'm not taking days off, I'm damaging my relationship at home, and all for what? Money. Now, the vast majority of my wealth at the time was tied up in the equity of the company, which basically means you have none, right? So most people don't even understand the difference between paper money and liquid cash. Paper money is not interesting. Like, they'll write about it in Forbes magazine, and kids will come up to me freaking out because they know my net worth is crazy high. And I'm like, the only thing you should care about is how much money do I have where I can go now manifest something in the real world, build a business, buy something, whatever. And that's a totally different game. So at that moment, I'm thinking, this is total misery. I want to wake up every day and enjoy my life, to have more energy being given to me than taken away. And in that moment, I realized the game I'm playing isn't money. It's not success. It's brain chemistry. And if the game that I'm playing is brain chemistry, which I'll say another way, deep and lasting fulfillment, the thing that as a human makes us feel good, the thing that we're all secret deep down, no matter what you tell people you're chasing, the thing you're actually chasing is fulfillment. You want to feel good about who you are. You want to feel good about your contributions. You want to feel good about meaning and purpose in your life. So those are the things ultimately that people are chasing. They think that money is going to give that to them and that they're wrong. And that's how they keep getting caught off guard. Now, the reason that money is this trap that everyone can tell you is a trap, and yet it will still capture you, is because money is real and it's really powerful. And the things that money lets you do in your life is almost unimaginable until you have money. And I see now what I'm doing, finally now having real liquid assets that are significant. You can, guys, think for 1 second right now. Imagine closing your eyes and thinking about that thing you most want, the thing you want to build. It's something beautiful. It's something you want to leave for humanity. I will just assume it isn't dumb shit like a car, right? It's really something. It's something you want to build and give, and it's going to be, I don't think in legacy, but like I get the sentiment. It's going to be your legacy. It's going to be that thing that outlasts you or helps other people or offers jobs or builds something that we all want. The only thing stopping you from doing it, you're going to say it's time, but it's not time. It's money. And that's how money gets people. Because once you know what you want to build with it, then it's really powerful. But if you're chasing money in and of itself, you'll burn out, I promise. You won't enjoy your life because you're not thinking about that end result. So anyway, at the height of all that, making money, wealthy on paper, totally miserable, I go into my partners and I say, here's your equity back. So literally me essentially sliding $2 million back across the table. Thank you, I'm quitting, I can't do this anymore, I'm not willing to keep chasing money, I want to feel alive. That was the statement I kept saying. I want to feel alive, I want to go do something that, brings me that sense of fulfillment, and this isn't it. And they said, look, come out to dinner with us. They were taken aback, very surprised.
We just gave them back $2 million.
Gave them back $2 million and quit, and it was like, this is goodbye. And so it was super abrupt. They said, come out to dinner with us. And I go out and they said, we could do this without you, but we don't want to. And that phrase changed the course of my life. Because what it allowed me to do was connect to something other than the money. And so for the first time, by that point, we were 6 or 7 years into the company of literally just around the clock. To give you an idea of how hardcore I was and how I had worked my way into equity, starting as a copywriter, I rented an apartment that I timed so I could make sure that if my business partners, which remember, at that time I was just their copywriter, if they were to ever call me at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, that I would be to their house in less than 10 minutes. So I timed, my wife would find an apartment she liked, and then we would drive first to one partner, then back, then to the other partner, and see if both of them were less than 7 minutes was what I was aiming for. And that was how we picked our apartment. So that's how diehard I was. Now, they had made the same offer to everybody basically in the company. They would say, we don't look for employees, we settle for employees, but we're always looking for partners. And so I had really taken them up on that. And that's how sort of all in I was. So now, after doing that for so many years and realizing it didn't bring me the fulfillment that I wanted, my wife having to pull me aside and saying, you're damaging our relationship because you work so much, my response wasn't, I want balance in my life, because I don't believe in balance. And if you guys have ever seen my content, you'll never hear me preach about balance or patience, none of that, because I have none of it. What I'm talking about is understand that passion is a process. So there's no passion lurking within you right now. There are areas of interest. Your job is to experience a whole bunch of stuff, find those areas of interest. So
and then build them out, right?
Correct. And I can talk about that later, but just to finish the story of how I end up in nutrition. So when they say we could do this without you, but we don't want to, I realized, whoa, like that I've needed that to connect to you as people. As you know, we talked a lot about this brotherhood. We had a brotherhood, and that brotherhood, I realized over the years, had become incredibly valuable to me, and was a huge part of what helped me change as a human being. Was being connected to other people who thought like I thought, who would do something as crazy as, you know, get an apartment and time it and all that because they had a goal and they were working towards their goals, and like we just talked the same language. And so hearing that again, I was like, okay, I can get behind that. But if we're going to work together, there's just a few things that have to be true from my perspective. Maybe it's not the same for you, but for me, here's what it would have to be. It would have to be a company predicated on value creation. It would have to be something that we're passionate about. We'd have to be building community, and we would need to be really ourselves, who we truly are, which was all a reaction to what we'd been doing in the technology company, which was all, by the way, I can't believe I'm giving this talk in Google. I was earning Google AdWords. Like, that was my life. And so there was no, I wasn't like communicating with another human being. I was in like the bidding system and all of that. And what are my competitors doing? And how does that impact like my bidding? And, you know, I mean, this is like in what, 2005, 2006. And so I didn't have a sense of connection to the consumer. And so I really wanted to connect with them. I wanted to build like a community. And so by the time we end up launching the company, this is now 2009, 2010, Facebook is coming along. Everybody's starting to think about, as individuals, how do we connect? And then I started thinking about how do we connect as consumers to, or as the company to the consumer. And thinking really what social media is just a megaphone. And it's going to give people the opportunity to say something about your company within minutes of an interaction with your company to a global audience. And so I was like, if you guys can get excited about that, and I'm quoting Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans and all that, because in my desperation, I'd been reading about stuff, just trying to figure out what's another way to do this. And so they said, you know, we actually feel the same. We want to do something that's passion-based, predicated on value, allow us to build community. They loved it all. And so for three very different reasons, we ended up on nutrition. I grew up in a morbidly obese family. So for me it was, I needed to have a mission that was so big and so compelling that it gave me energy that I could show up every day and fight for people that I could think about. And there's an awesome quote often attributed to Mother Teresa that says, nobody will act for the many, but people will act for the one. So if there's someone you can picture, someone you know, someone you love, like you'll go to battle for them. So I knew I'll show up every day and fight for my mom and my sister. And I know that they're gonna die too early if we can't figure out how to solve this problem of making food that people want to eat taste good. And so that became the mission of the company, was to end metabolic disease, and to do it by making food that people can choose based on taste, and it happens to be good for them.
Interesting. And so this process, so you finished school, you copywriter, you've kind of grown through the ranks, and now it's pivoted to a nutrition company. So then how do we go from nutrition to impact theory?
Yes.
Yeah, which is about storytelling and empowerment.
Yeah, so if you know the classic hero's journey, then this is at the end of the Joseph Campbell's classic hero's journey. The part that isn't often talked about is the hero returns home to bring the message to others. So whatever that journey just taught him, he's going to come back now and he's going to help other people with that. And while I don't consider myself a teacher, returning to film is very much me returning home, right? It's where I started. It's my first love. It's my deepest passion. It's and it is all of those things because of its ability to impact people. So the irony is I wasn't trying to return to film. What I was trying to do is pull people out of the matrix. So movies have, I think in movies, they've always just spoken to me maybe more than most. And the movie The Matrix came out March 31st, 1999. Just had its anniversary, its 19-year anniversary. And I remember going to a preview screening of that movie because I'm a comic nerd and I was at a comic convention. They were handing out tickets. And when they're walking in to the opening scene, basically, and the agents show up and the cop goes, "Don't worry, we can handle one little girl." And Agent Smith goes, "No, Lieutenant, your men are already dead." And then they cut to Trinity. She jumps into the air, freezes. In that theater that I saw that in, everyone screamed in unison and started clapping. Now, I had never experienced something like that ever in a movie before. The spontaneous eruption of the entire audience in the middle of something that wasn't like a scream or a yell. It was like celebratory. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. And then ultimately, as the movie plays out, it's a movie about belief. And it was coming at a time in my life where the only thing I believed was that I was a talentless hack and that I had no idea how to make my life come true. So seeing this metaphor for belief, and that what Neo really has to figure out is that he's the one. And that first, for him to finally come to believe in himself enough that he is the one, someone has to tell him he's not the one. And so he's got to go on that whole journey, and he's got to try the impossible, and he's got to be willing to face failure. And the fact that it works is because nobody was ever before him willing to face the failure. And so because he's willing to face the failure, and if you remember in the movie, he fails. He dies. But it's only in remembering, wait a second, these are just rules, and I can break the rules, that he then comes back and realizes once he understands the rules, once he believes in himself enough, then he can do all this incredible stuff. Now, I don't think we actually live in the Matrix. And if we do, I don't think that it really matters. But as a metaphor, I think it's the perfect metaphor for the human experience, because what you believe about yourself will entirely dictate what you do with your life. Okay? Now let that hang in the air. Now as that's hanging in the air, let me tell you a story. I started big brothering when I was 18 years old for a kid in the inner cities. One kid named Rashawn Jackson. Rashawn, I didn't know this at the time, but he was in an abusive household. He'd been adopted, and his mother was just brutal. And he always wanted to spend time with me. And so at first it was just supposed to be an 8-week program. I was going to go in and help him with his homework. At 6 weeks, they tell you, hey, make sure you warn them that you're only coming for 2 more weeks. I warn him, he goes nuclear, unlike anything I've ever seen in my life, freaking out, crying, fighting with other kids. I mean, just like a whirling dervish. It was pure insanity. I finally get him over, and I said, is this because I said I'm only coming for 2 more weeks? He says, yes. I say, all right, look, I'll make you a promise. If you'll settle down and do your homework, because he was always hard to wrangle, if you'll settle down and do your homework, as long as I live in Los Angeles, I'll tutor you. Deal? Deal. That ends up being an 8.5-year relationship that sees me helping. I become the guardian of the court when he gets taken away from his abusive stepmother or adopted mother. And I remember thinking, this kid's amazing. Like, he's so interesting, and he's so interested, and just like, he's amazing. But he once said to me the phrase, I already been had that. And I said to him, you already been had that? And he was like, yeah, I already been had that. And I was like, you already been had that? And in that moment I realized he actually thought that's how you said it. And so he goes, well, that's how my teacher says it. And I was like, oh my God. And so here I'm 19 years old, and this crashing realization hits me that because of where he's born, his options have just been limited. Then if you ask him what he wants to do with his life, his dreams are small. He's got no big dreams. So I'm like, wow, strike 2. And then, of course, data now has come out just in treasure troves about how much your zip code is going to determine your future success. But I was living it. I was seeing it happen before my eyes. And then flash forward, in Quest, manufacturing. In manufacturing, you're in inner cities because that's where the zoning happens, so that you can actually, get the kinds of things that, the kind of square footage that you need. And so now I've got 1,000 employees that all grew up like Rashawn, and 1,000 people with small dreams. And I started in the interviewing process, because in the beginning, everyone interviewed with me, whether you were the chief sales officer or you were the janitor, you interviewed with me. And so I saw thousands. I probably interviewed, probably close to 3,000 people at this point, which is crazy. And every one of them I would ask the magic genie question. The magic genie is about to show up. They're going to grant you one wish and one wish only. Can't wish for something for yourself, so you can't wish for something for somebody else to cure cancer, bring somebody back from the dead, whatever. It's got to be for you. What do you wish for? Every single person said the same thing. Any guesses what they said?
Limitless wishes.
That would have been so smart. I did tell them they couldn't wish for more wishes, so I didn't get that one. They never would have thought to do that, though. So not a single person ever said that. First they said a job, okay? Fair enough, right? You're here for an interview. You think that's what I want to hear. You think it's a trick question. So then I would say, I get why you said that. That's not really what you want, is it? No, it's not. Okay, what do you really want? Money. Okay, fantastic. How much money? I never got any answer other than one. And the answer was $1 million every time.
And they could wish for anything.
Anything. Over and over and over. You could ask for $1 trillion. and you ask for $1 million? And it just, it actually started to scare me. Now that's a really long story, but you need to understand like how deeply that embedded itself. You've got Rashawn and me feeling like I totally failed to help him avoid what I could see was going to be his future. And then you have 1,000 Rashawns, and now I feel responsible to help change their belief system. And I believe if I can change their belief system, I can change the course of their life. And so we start the same Quest University, and I tell people making the protein bars is just your tuition. What you're really here to do is figure out what you want to do with your life and then get the skills that you would need to go and further yourself down that path. And I realized there's 25 things that I had done to my mind that if they did to their minds, they would truly have a growth mindset. So I write the impact theory belief system out. It's the 25 things anyone needs to believe and do in order to be able to manifest their dreams, to actually make them come true. And then I started the interview show and all that. And then as I go through this and realize that the vast majority of these people do not respond to the message, right? So think about how many people really respond when you just give them the direct answer. This is how you do what I've done. Most people, they don't listen. It's not entertaining enough, right? So they just ignore it. Like, I'll just tell you right now, the secrets of the universe, anything you've ever wanted to know, they've already been written in a book. You literally don't need anything else. It's already written. If you were willing to go out, read, research, put in the work, practice, test, it's already all there. What people really want is entertainment.
A story.
100%. So if you look at, so I'm a big believer, don't try to change behavior, try to leverage it. So if you said, Tom, you have to change the world, would you rather leverage people's reading behavior or would you rather leverage their viewing behavior? The answer to me is very simple. I'd rather control Netflix than the Library of Congress if I want to make real change. So because one is just more on the surface, just more entertaining. It's passive, right? You don't have to work as hard. You don't have to flip pages. You don't have to face, like for me, I always had to face the inadequacy of how slowly I read. Whereas movies, it was a truly emotive, emotional experience. So when I started looking at, okay, how do I really, no bullshit, how do I change the lives of these 1,000 people or the hundreds of millions of people that they represent? How do I actually get them to adopt a belief system? The answer is narrative.
Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell.
And speaking of which, I love what you said about you cannot change human behavior, you can only leverage it. It's written down right here. And to go back to Campbell, he said something that was super profound as well. He said, if you want to change the world, you have to change the metaphor. And I think that's what you guys are attempting to do with like your structure, your programs, and your interviews. And to kind of take this back towards empowerment, and you and I discussed this a little bit before we got on stage, but I graduated in 2010 at the height of the recession, so a very similar situation where, there are no jobs. It's frustrating. I'm angry, I'm upset. I can't rely on my parents because they're in a worse situation than I am. And you kind of, descend into this pit of hell where you're angry, frustrated, all of these things. And my question to you is I wonder as well if before you can take the empowerment, before you can own up and say, actually, I've got this, or I can do this, if you have to go through those trials and tribulations before you can come back up.
I don't think you have to, but I think that most people will need that to be the thing that they find themselves so profoundly unhappy that now they're moving in the opposite direction. Right?
The rock bottom.
It's emotional rock bottom, exactly. So it's not a necessary component. I think there are people that do it without it, but I think that oftentimes the people that bounce back the farthest in the other direction are the ones that hit hardest.
And in some of your shows and our conversation, we've talked about this idea that it's all your fault. And at first glance, it sounds very mean, right? Like everything that happens is your fault. But I think behind it, there's like this nugget of wisdom where if you can train yourself to keep things within your realm of control, you'll always make the best of a situation. I remember when I was really young and I fell off my bike, I wasn't wearing my knee pads, I was upset and I was sad. And my dad's first reply was, well, who told you to ride without knee pads? Like, you were in control of that situation. And it sucks at first to hear that, but in the long run, it sort of builds this resilience and this capacity to keep things within your realm of control. Now, to bring this back to a question is, Dr. Jordan Peterson would argue that when something goes wrong, you start by looking externally and seeing okay, what was I actually responsible for and what happened outside of my domain of control? Whereas I think perhaps you and I would agree that maybe it's to start internally. Okay, how was I responsible for this? Was there anything I could have done differently? And only then look outwards. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that the reality is that I don't care about what the reality is. That's like the truth. And this is where I think people get really hung up with my message is you're not experiencing life as it actually is, okay? You're experiencing life through 3 pounds of mush that is a tri-layer brain that is first trying to keep you alive, right? Mm-hmm. So your most based instincts in what they call the lizard brain. Then you've got the mammalian brain layered on top that's designed to give you the emotions that you need to move in a specific direction with a lot of authority and a lot of intent. And then the thing that makes you uniquely human, the neocortex, which allows you to ignore, essentially, those baser instincts. Mm-hmm. But if you know something like the deep limbic system is when it's inflamed, it processes data as being more negative. Mm-hmm. So to give you an idea, and this is one of the most fascinating things about the brain, as Shakespeare noted, there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Mm-hmm. There's nothing good or bad, right? There's just stimulus, and then there's response.
Things happen, and they're given a meaning.
But people think that it is objectively a certain way. So now because they think it is objectively a certain way, they feel they are supposed to react based on those emotions that are getting kicked up in their mind. What I'm saying is absolutely not. Those emotions may not serve you. They're certainly not aimed at moving you towards your goal. Their job is to keep you alive, plain and simple. So that's not necessarily very helpful in a modern context. So if you want to always be moving towards your goal, you want to be optimizing, you've got to learn to get control of your emotions. You've got to learn to understand to tell yourself a narrative that isn't predicated on necessarily identifying what is objectively true, because I don't think that we experience the world that way. It's identifying what's going to work to get me to my goal. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, like, my whole thing is goal first, everything else works backwards from that.
Mm-hmm. Like starting from the grand strategy, like identifying it and then building the steps backwards to reverse engineer it, essentially.
Correct. So the reason I say everything is my fault and that I use those words is it's a litmus test. If you're still having an emotional reaction to the word fault and you feel compelled to argue with me because you think that I'm victim shaming, like it tells me immediately where you are in your own journey, right? Like if you're gonna waste time getting lost on the words you don't like instead of going, is there a part of this message that's usable for me, yes or no? Mm-hmm. Then it's a filtering mechanism. People that haven't gotten past that first layer, they first have to address that, like whether or not they want to be goal-oriented or not.
Yeah, definitely. And something, like I speak with, college students, through tours or intern programs, and what's most fascinating to me is that, or the thing that I really try to convey to them is like, look, whatever happens, there can be some good from it or some benefit derived from it if you choose to look for that, for that angle. I'm always reminded of the Stoic story of, I forget the philosopher's name at the moment, but he was involved in a shipwreck, and his friends immediately went to console him to say like, oh, what a shame, we're so sorry that you lost all these things. And his reply was essentially, like, lost, like, I'm free now. I'm not, held down by all of my possessions. This is fantastic news. And so I think that that's where a lot of our peers kind of get lost in, is that the lack of realization that anything has a benefit if you can look at it that way.
And I'll give you something else, and this is something that I'm working on, and so bear with me as I stumble through this. This is one of the most important things for anybody to realize, and anybody that goes to that, like, the world is working against me, like that's their default answer. What they have not yet figured out is that skills have utility. Skills have utility. There's something in the way that we educate that leads people to believe that skills are this temporary thing that's merely meant to help you pass the test, to get the grade, to get moved on to the next thing. And we've lost an understanding, certainly outside of engineering, that a skill has utility. And what I mean by that is I believe the very purpose of life, the whole reason that we're all here, is to close your eyes, imagine a world, the world that you want to become reality, open your eyes, go acquire the skills that you will need to actually build that world.
Mm-hmm. Embark on your hero's journey.
Right. And it's acquiring those skills no longer as a metaphor. You're actually getting skills that allow you to do things. And so people understand skills in that context when they're an engineer, because they know, well, if I know this programming language, then I can actually write code that can be executed in this way. An architect, if I learn engineering principles, I can build buildings that aren't going to fall down, right? They understand that. But like once you get into the humanities, people no longer think about, oh, skills have utility. Like they actually do something. Like if I'm a teacher, I should really probably learn about the developmental cycle of children. Why? Because I need to control them. If I can get them quiet, paying attention in an optimal state for information, then I can make them better students. That's the utility. Because of the things that I'm learning about how to get them to be quiet and where I want them and all that, I can get them in their seats, I can get them paying attention, prime them. Like maybe what I have to learn about is the correlation between exercise and cognitive optimization, like whatever it is. But like learning those skills, if you get really good at that, means your students will walk out of your classroom better prepared, better grades, more knowledge, go on to do better, right? Like they found in the Stanford marshmallow test, the single most correlated factor of success is the ability to delay gratification. Well, now imagine you're a teacher and you learn to teach kids how to delay gratification. That may be the single most important thing those kids will ever learn. And because you learned that skill, now that skill has massive utility. But people don't approach the world that way. They're always looking for what's the broken system. And I'm saying, forget about that. Figure out how to fix a system. That's fine. But don't waste your energy trying to figure out what's broken in the system until you know how to fix a system. But most people don't. They want to learn how to squawk. They want to go, I know it's broken. Anybody can give you that really cool speech about how the current education system was designed to create factory workers. Okay, we all know it. But is anybody fixing the system? No. And it's not going to get fixed until somebody goes, I have to learn the very nature of fixing systems. That's the skill I have to acquire, and I know what its utility is, and then the expected outcome in the real world. So when I hear people where their reaction is to bitch about a problem, like you and I were talking, you being Hispanic is working against you. Jason, you being an African American, it's working against you. Like you're going to have to go uphill. But now what? You're going to sit and complain about it? Because it won't help you, right? So if you have a goal, it's like it does suck that women have to work harder to get to the same place that as a white male in America that I have to get to. But if it is true, if we're all going to accept that it's true, we can all sit there and go, we need to focus on the systems. Fair enough, and I'm glad that some people do that. The other option, though, is to say, well, I completely control me. And the one thing I will tell any human being alive right now, there is always room for the best. And once you're able, through your skills that have utility, to move somebody else closer to their goal, you will become a hot commodity, no matter what. No matter what. Okay? Think about the scientists. What were the scientists after World War II? Right before they were scientists for us, they were Nazis. But we were way happy to let go of that because they had crazy skills that we needed, right? So really what it comes down to is, what are your skills? Like if you've got skills that can be used to build something beautiful, to do something wonderful to the world, to help people move towards their goals, that will excite the masses because they want that thing that you're going to create, that it's going to improve people's lives. But only thing that mattered in all of that was you got really good at something. And somewhere along the way, we lost that the punchline is, no matter what you do to the system, you as an individual need to get extraordinary at something. And so my encouragement to people is, go get extraordinary. Like, don't worry about whether the system is broken or not. We built Quest, $1 billion company, in less than 5 years coming out of the Great Recession. So, what was it? In the Great Depression, more millionaires were created in the Great Depression than any other time in history. It's like, it just comes down to somebody goes, honestly, this is how I react. The system is too big and complicated. I'm too afraid to try to get caught up in fixing that. I'm too big of a chicken. There, I just said it. I'm too big of a chicken to deal with that. But I can deal with myself. I can go get extraordinary, right? So focus on that. Go get extraordinary. Go become the best of whatever it is you want to be. But go become the best of it and see how the world opens to you.
I love it. I love it. And it also, like, it's much more difficult and I would argue noble to work on yourself as opposed to, bitching or complaining about an esoteric system, which is very loosely defined depending on who you're speaking with. And I think that's where we're at, and that's how I think we can empower individuals to become the best versions of themselves, because then in doing that, they help their communities, their cities, and hopefully the world.
Totally agree.
Awesome. Tom, we have a lot more to talk about, and unfortunately we're very limited on time, so I want to open up to questions from the audience. Mr.
Actually, this question is about
Here, you want the mic? Boom. Look at that.
Check, check. All right, perfect.
My Derek Carr impersonation.
So this question actually just kind of popped into my head while you were talking, because I totally, as fanboyish as this sounds, I'll just put it out there. I've like 1,000% agree with everything you've said. And then I thought about when you said, just go be extraordinary. And I'm curious to myself because I also agree with the idea that human beings can be extraordinary at literally anything and all things that we haven't even thought of yet. So when you set out on your quest to become extraordinary, and when you set on your quest to become extraordinary, was it just let me become extraordinary in general? Or did you actually focus on, I'm going to become extraordinary at this? And final question, what do you consider yourself to be extraordinary at?
Awesome. So I don't think there is extraordinary in general. And my biggest lament, my biggest heartbreak is that every entrepreneur, to a person without exception, will come to me and say, okay, hey, I've got this vision, I've got my missions crystal clear, my business plan ready to rock. And as you begin to push and poke, you'll realize they have no clarity whatsoever. And the best analogy is someone will, and this is how the entrepreneurs approach me, I want to win a gold medal. And they think the fact that they want to win a gold medal is clarity, man, that they've got it on lock. And I'm like, awesome. In the Olympics? Yes, in the Olympics. Okay, cool. Summer or winter games? Summer. Okay, fantastic. Tennis? No. Swimming? Yes. Okay, great. The medley? The backstroke? Like, until you get down to the very specific event in which you want to win that gold medal, you don't know how to train. Right? Then that's where it becomes an issue, right? So somebody who wants to be extraordinary in general, like how do you train? What does that mean? So I need to know exactly what do you want to do. So for me, the thing that I want, and I won't say that I'm yet extraordinary in anything, and that's a very Stoic stance, and hopefully everybody takes it. Like the more you learn, the more you realize you have to learn. So the thing that I'm committed to becoming extraordinary at is telling stories that change people at the belief system level. So that's my goal, right? Where I'm just entertaining them. They don't know that anything else is happening, but that a generation or 2 generations from now, nobody would think to tell their kids anything other than, everything is your fault, Timmy, come on, like you know better. Like at the end of the day, your life is a reflection of your choices. And they won't even remember that it was a Jiminy Cricket style character that told Pinocchio that in a movie that I made. They just have the words to repeat. It's that belief system, it's baked in, right? It's part of the cultural subconscious. We're all talking about it. We all respond to each other that way. So that when somebody is woe is meing, we don't feed into that. When somebody's saying, oh, the system is broken, we immediately go, rad, what do we do about it? How do we fix it? What skill do we need to go repair it? But that's not the public discourse right now, right? The public discourse right now is you're victim shaming. No, I'm not. I don't want them to be a victim. You're going to be victimized in your life. Of this, I promise you. But you decide whether or not you're a victim, which is a state of being. So all of those things right now are hotly contested. What I want to do through entertainment is just make it patently obvious how we should all be thinking and acting to make our dreams come true. So that's the thing I want to be extraordinary. And then I think there was one more part to that question.
So the question was loaded. So it was, could you be, oh, well, actually, no, you answered both. Because it's a 2-part question. What
Perfect.
did you set out to be extraordinary at? What do you consider yourself extraordinary at? And then what are your comments on just being extraordinary, seeking to be extraordinary in general?
When I think about like what is the meaning of life, I really believe nature made a choice with every creature it creates, and it essentially is a bifurcated path. Number 1 is I'm going to preload you with all the algorithms. We call them intuition or your instincts. And so you come with instincts, and like a horse fall, when it comes out, it can walk, it can run, it can jump, it can feed. A human baby, on the other hand, when it's born, is a lump of flesh. It poos in its own diapers. You could lay it next to a bottle and it would still starve to death. Like, we are completely dependent, because what we want to do is actually finish the maturing of the brain on the outside in the stimulus to which we need to become adapted. So the reason that humans have become the ultimate apex predator, unlike anything this world has ever seen before, ever, is our ability to adapt. Now, if you believe that adaptation is the absolute core of what makes us great, it is our defining characteristic, then it becomes a question of, well, how does nature make sure that we do what nature wants us to do? So if nature wants us to adapt, it's going to make it pleasurable. So when you think about what do humans really want, I think it's a deep and lasting sense of fulfillment. Okay, it's the happiness that lasts. It's the non-transient bowl of ice cream style happiness, and it's the I just saved somebody from a burning building. It's the I've helped these children's lives are going to go and be better. It's things like that that make you feel good about who you are as a human being and what your contributions are. That actually comes from suffering. It comes from working hard. It comes from putting in that effort, because that's what you have to do to adapt. You adapt to a stressor. You adapt to pain. You adapt to difficulty. You get stronger under heavier and heavier weight, right? That's how it works. That's just the call and answer of nature. So that process is intensely pleasurable in the sense of fulfillment. So going out and doing the hard things to see how much of your potential you can actuate, pursuing greatness in a very specific direction is, I believe, the only thing that will make people happy. So when I look at depression, anxiety, all on the rise, all rampant, people feeling lost, not knowing what they want to do, where they want to be, the answer is decide you're going to be extraordinary at something, because it gives you more energy than it takes. And there's a whole process, I'm not going to go into it now. But get that thing in your life, and then go after it with everything you have, with total disregard for balance. That you pour yourself into it in a way, you give yourself over to it. And I think we have one more bifurcation. You've got the family, which provides a similar sense of deep fulfillment, and I think that's a perfectly valid choice. And if you don't hear the incongruous nature with what I'm saying, I'm not saying it very well. But those are the two paths that I see humans go on. People that are parents, the kid was born, changed my life, perspective, totally done, right? Like, you know the talk and how it feels. And then on this side, you've got an equal lack of balance, all in, totally committed, do or die, I would give myself over to this thing that I'm building, right? And that's where I'm at. I've chosen not to have kids. It's not the path I'm on. But I've given myself over in a similar way, and I get a similar sense of deep fulfillment.
Great, thank you.
For sure.
In terms of adopting this growth mindset, or like just developing yourself as an individual, how big of a role would you say is managing your relationships, and how important is it that the people around you adopt more or less the same mindset or support this mindset that you're adopting?
So you're now poking me in my soft underbelly, which I appreciate you asking the hard questions. As a CEO, it is ridiculously important to make sure that your team is on this page, that they're totally bought in, that they're thinking the same way and acting the same way. Otherwise, your culture begins to fragment and get toxic. As a person just out in the world, it's amazing to surround yourself with other people that think like that, because they're going to reinforce it in you, and that's such a beautiful thing to have in your life, and they're going to push you and escalate you to be better. But also as an individual, no one should be able to stop you, right? And so whether you're working in a toxic environment or not, and everybody else acts like a dumbass, like when people come to me and they write in and say, hey, I'm working in an environment, because I'm a huge believer, if you guys haven't read Ray Dalio's Principles, read it, it's incredible. But every time I recommend it to somebody that works in a company where I imagine the culture for one person to change would be so hard, I do have little pangs of guilt. But here's the truth. You could put me in any organization in the world, and the strategy that I would adopt if I wanted to move up and I wanted to change the culture would be to become useful to other people with no need to get the credit. Because secretly, I know deep down inside, when people steal from you, they know they're stealing from you. Not that they're going to feel guilt. I don't need them to feel guilt. I want them to be terrified of losing proximity to me, which now all of a sudden means people begin to orbit around me because I'm helping their life. Then all of a sudden it's just, oh, why is everybody orbiting around him? Like, they're always turning to him. And you ever notice, like, everybody knows if I took whoever is running a meeting and I took them out, suddenly there'll be a second person that all eyes will start going to. And that person is the unofficial leader of the group, right? And I would immediately, as fast as I could, by giving value to other people, by not caring about getting any credit for my own ideas, but pumping out ideas at a more rapid pace, by being extraordinary, by making sure that I'm better than this at everyone else, by being more prepared, by putting in more work, all of that, that people would begin to rotate around me. It's a longer strategy, But in that situation, now you've got a lot of clout with people. And so when you say, I don't do that, I don't steal ideas, all of a sudden then people would start to feel guilty about stealing ideas from you. You start to see a shift slowly over time. So I won't over answer your question, which I've already gotten real dangerous to. I'll stop there. But I'm really, really fascinated about antagonistic group dynamics and how to change them by being the unchangeable, of just like having a true north about what your ethics are and just always being true to it.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about clarifying your goals and what you're chasing, and how much of that is just choosing something and committing to it and going after it, and how much of it is really a process of figuring out what you want and chipping away at that and getting very clear on it through some internal process.
Here's the amazing part. You've actually already answered the question. So, and most people only get one half. So it really is both of what you just said. You need to do the work first of being like, what do I really want? And so now I'll walk through the process that I alluded to a couple times. So passion is not a lightning rod moment. It is not something that's hiding inside of you. It is a process. You're an architect, not an archaeologist. Okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to go experience a whole lot of stuff. And Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired Magazine, talks about not prematurely optimizing. And I think that that's so important. So in life, if you don't have a passion, you want to go experience a lot of things with almost total disregard for what that might be. When you encounter something that you find interesting, engage with it more. As you engage with it, see, is this turning into a real fascination? If it's turning into a real fascination, then ask yourself a very simple question. Do I want to become the greatest in the world at this? And if the answer is yes, if the thought of that fills you with excitement, winning that gold medal or designing that thing or whatever, you think, oh my God, like that would be amazing. And the thought of actually putting in that work is kind of cool. Like I want to develop that skill set. Now you're going to go down the path of gaining mastery. And I'm stealing this, excuse me, from a guy named Cal Newport in a book called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And I think that passion is like love. I don't believe that there's one-sided love. I think that's infatuation. Love is where you're in a real relationship. There's give and take. There's vulnerability. There's all the things that make real love this beautiful interplay of two brains that are actually in sync, like as in you can see it in an fMRI scanner. It's really crazy. Okay? That's love. Infatuation is a stage before that. So you don't know if you have a passion for something until you're gaining mastery, you're sincerely pursuing becoming the best in the world at that, and those skills have utility. And as you put that utility to the test in service of something bigger than yourself, helping other people, you will get energy from that as a social creature, knowing I've worked my ass off for this. Greeks have a name for it. It's called techne. I've worked my ass off for this set of skills, and it actually helps other people. And it makes me feel good, and I'm contributing. And so that thing where it's like I show up every day and technically I'm at work, but I'm actually building something that's helping people, and that makes me feel really good. One, it's hard and I'm pushing myself and I love it and it's interesting. And then on the other hand, it actually helps. And it's that dope interplay. Now, where people get stuck is, we were just talking about this before we started the talk. Most people are standing in that room. They've got 1,000 things they're interested in. They can't bring themselves to shut any one of those doors. And because they don't shut any one of those doors, they never walk through the one remaining door. And so I always tell people, your job is to shut doors. Literally, the word decide means to close. It's like break it up in Latin, or to cut, excuse me. It means to cut something out, right? So you're cutting out the 999 other options and going with just the one. And if you have to do it at random and just shut blindly 999 doors, fine. Go through that one, see, is it a fascination or not? And if it's not, come back, open a new one, and move. The only thing that's really going to ruin you as a person is indecision. It's the only thing you should fear.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining. Tom, thank you for coming by.
Thanks for having me, man.
It was a pleasure and a
great.
privilege. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.